Marvel or DC? And by DC, I obviously mean WWDC 2018. That was a bad joke. So who's excited for the actual 2018 WWDC? It's actually happening next week. And in case you don't know what WWDC is, it's one of Apple's 2 large events each year. We have one in June, that's mostly for software releases, and then one in September, that's for the iPhones, and then maybe a March or October mini event for the new Macs and the new iPads. But WWDC isn't just for software, and in fact, we've actually had quite a lot of hardware products being announced, and some even released at WWDC in the past. So grab all that popcorn, because this is going to be a really exciting and interesting video with everything to expect from next week's event. Actually, not just 5 or 10 things, but actually we're expecting to see about 12 new things announced next week. So yeah, grab all that popcorn and enjoy. Okay, so first things first, you've probably seen the official WWDC event invite, and this is how it looks like. And WWDC, by the way, isn't just one event. It's basically an entire week of events, workshops, and courses made for developers so that they can learn more about Apple's upcoming software releases and basically optimize their apps for the official release, which would actually be in September. So WWDC 2018 is happening on Monday, June the 4th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So that would actually be about 6 p.m. here in the UK. I mean, not about actually 6 p.m. in the UK, which would be quite late, but I'll try and make a video on that as soon as it's over. So do subscribe and enable notifications if you want to see, if you want to be the first one to see my day one at WWDC 2018 coverage. But the good news is that unlike the years before, this event would actually be fully live streamed on Apple and also available to watch on Chrome, not just Safari. So you no longer need an Apple product to actually view the event. As to what to expect from Monday's event, the first announcement would be iOS 12. So I've actually done a top features wishlist video on iOS 12, and I'll be doing an in-depth what to expect video on iOS 12. That should be tomorrow. So do subscribe and hit that bell again if you don't want to miss that. But yeah, long story short, iOS 12 would be focused mostly on performance improvements and bug fixes. There would be a few new features and optimizations, mostly for the iPhone 10, but other than that, it's going to be an incremental improvement, mostly to fix the reputation that iOS 11 had. iOS 11 was horrible in terms of bugs and glitches, orientation bugs, and lots of issues. And next year with iOS 13, we would be finally getting a redesign. Now, we have seen some hints at a possible redesign in the actual WWDC invite itself with all those 3D shapes, even though most reports are saying quite the opposite, that this would be only happening next year with iOS 13. But one of the biggest improvements, by the way, in iOS 12, as well as macOS 10.14, would be universal app support, or cross-platform apps, essentially. So iOS apps would run on macOS, and maybe even some macOS apps would be able to run on iOS, most likely only on the iPads only because of that larger display. So now developers will need to optimize their apps for both touch support as well as mouse and keyboard inputs. But the biggest advantage to all this comes to the Mac. So on the Macs, we have the Mac App Store, but that one's pretty much non-existent when it comes to the number of apps compared to the iOS App Store. And it's not just that, but apps are almost never updated. The Twitter app is a really good example of that, and most big apps such as Netflix, Spotify, and many, many more, they're not even on the App Store anyways. So with macOS 10.14, the Mac would be getting the biggest update since macOS 10 itself. So this is similar to what Google has done with the latest Chromebooks. The Pixelbook, for example, on which I've actually done a review before, that one actually lets you use both Chrome OS as well as Android apps. And then besides all this, we will also be getting a brand new update in terms of WatchOS, so WatchOS 5 this time. We haven't had any leaks and rumors in terms of this, but yeah, I'm not really sure, to be honest. I'm not really sure what to expect, but as always, we would be getting some brand new watch faces, more likely some improved fitness functionality as well. Obviously an always-on display, as well as the ability to fully create your own watch faces, or at least add third-party ones. That'd be awesome, but I'm not sure if we'll be seeing those anytime soon. So that was everything in terms of the software releases. There's obviously also tvOS, but I mean, come on. That's not that exciting. So let's move on to the actual hardware releases from that we expect to see in WWDC 2018. So something that we might see are some brand new iPad Pros. So the 10.5 inches iPad Pro, that was introduced back in June 2017, so pretty much a year ago. And then the big iPad Pro 3rd generation, also known as the iPad X, well, it's not going to be called the iPad X, but that one might be introduced at WWDC. So this one was actually expected at the iPad event back in March, and now it's expected either in June or in October at a separate iPad event. I've actually done a full separate video, actually multiple ones on this iPad. The main one is my final leaks and rumors on this iPad, so do check that one out if you want to know everything in terms of this iPad. But essentially, this would be Apple's biggest iPad change since the original iPad back in 2010. Count the number of times I've said iPad in this video. But yeah, the bezels would be essentially removed entirely, and same applies for the home button, which would also be removed, and then we would be getting Face ID as well. So essentially, we would be getting an iPhone 10 style iPad, apart from the OLED display. Unfortunately, we would still be getting an LCD display. Now, in terms of how likely it is that we'll see this at WWDC, it's maybe about a 60% chance or so. We haven't really had any reports on this as of lately. We know that Apple is working on such an iPad as an update to the current generation 10.5 inches iPad Pro. We're not sure if this would be announced at WWDC or not. I would honestly put my money on October, on an October announcement. But again, do check this video out, my following rumors on this iPad if you want to know more about that. Now, the next hardware update would be in terms of the Macs. So first off, we have the 12-inch MacBook. This was last updated in June 2017. And here's something really interesting that I discovered yesterday. So I went on apple.com to have a quick look at basically the specs before making this video, and the 12-inch MacBook as well as the iMacs, they had a new symbol next to them as if they've just been updated, even though they had the exact same specs as last year. So all the other Macs, by the way, they had no new symbol, so maybe someone made a mistake and released that new symbol a bit earlier. So I don't know. That's a possibility. And to be honest, the 12-inch MacBook and the iMacs, especially the iMacs, are the most likely candidates for a spec bump in June. Now, as far as I'm aware, in terms of the 12-inch MacBooks, there are no 8th generation Intel Core Y processors. This is, by the way, the name, the actual processor models that the 12-inch MacBook uses. It used to use the Core M, but this is it's still Core M. So it's a 4.5 watts processor. It's just the rebranded version. This is what we have inside the 12-inch MacBooks. But yeah, there's no 8th generation, as far as I know, of this chip. So maybe some spec bumps in terms of the clock speed. So maybe just a higher clock speed. Maybe a lower price point, and maybe some extra storage. Probably not. So most likely just some clock speed bumps. Now, in terms of the MacBook Pros, I've actually done a Leaks and Rumors episode back in January. So yeah, do take a look at this if you want to know everything in more detail about the new MacBook Pros. But long story short, Coffee Lake updates in terms of the processor. So possibly even a 9.9 processor inside the top-of-the-line 15-inch MacBook Pro. And this would give us a 6-core processor, 12 threads, which would be awesome in a 15-inch laptop. And then obviously on the 13-inch MacBook Pros, we would be getting a quad-core processor from dual cores. So some pretty big improvements when it comes to processors. Obviously, this would depend on if Apple has enough supply from Intel in terms of that i9 processor. Otherwise, if they don't, then the new MacBook Pros would only be released around November or so towards the end of the year. Now, in terms of the GPU, AMD hasn't really released anything after the 560 Pro, so I'm not sure on that one. Apple might keep the same GPU as in the 2017 models. And then finally, we have the keyboard. So this was literally the worst part about the 2016-2017 MacBook Pros. So not only does the keyboard fail extremely often, but even when it doesn't, it's still quite difficult to type on that keyboard because, well, you get almost no feedback. I actually went through 3 different MacBook Pros 2016s until I got one that didn't have a broken keyboard, and on a $3,000/3,000 device, that's honestly completely unacceptable. It's the keyboard, which is literally the thing you use basically every day, every second of using your laptop, you're using the keyboard. Apple is even facing some multiple lawsuits on this, by the way, so hopefully Apple does update the keyboard on the 2018 models, because otherwise, well, I don't know. We'll see what happens with those lawsuits. Next up, we have the MacBook Air. So this one hasn't been updated since 2015 in terms of the actual specs. We got a small bump in 2017. But in terms of the actual specs, 2015 was the last time it was updated. And the design hasn't been updated since 2010, so 8 years ago. Now, we are expecting a big redesign in 2018. It might not happen at WWDC though. And same as with most of the other products I've talked about in this video, I've also done a full Leaks and Rumors on the 2018 MacBook Air with concepts featuring the new design and everything to expect. But yeah, new design along with the Retina display finally, and updated specs. Those would be the main changes, and possibly on October or even a November release. That's what most reports have been saying. Now, we could see a tease at WWDC like we had with the iMac Pro, with the Mac Pro, the Apple Watch, the HomePod, and a lot of Apple devices that have only been teased at WWDC and then released a few months later. So that could still happen, a tease of the new MacBook Air. And finally, when it comes to the iMacs, an iMac update is very likely to happen. So the current model was released back in June 2017, so exactly 1 year ago. And the main change for the 2018 models would be an updated CPU with Coffee Lake and the 8700K processor, which is a beast of a processor. Yeah, this is literally the processor at the moment on the market with the highest single core performance, even more than, I think the highest I've seen was like 6,600 points in Geekbench 4, which is just crazy. This is also a 6-core processor, 12 threads. So aside from this, a brand new design along with a brand new thermal system would be amazing to have. But if the iMac is released in June instead of October or November, then I don't really see a brand new design being introduced. But yeah, that would be amazing having thinner bezels, because the current generation iMac design, did you guys know that it was actually introduced back in 2009? Yeah, 9 years ago for this design. I'm obviously talking about a front design. The iMac did get thinner back in 2012 and did get a 5K design, a 5K display back in 2014. And then you could even say that, oh, it got the new color, the space gray color, which is, I know it's exclusive for the iMac Pro, so it's not really an iMac feature. But yeah, the actual face of the iMac, so to say, has remained the same for almost 10 years now. And then something that was announced back in September 2017 and still hasn't been released is Apple's AirPower charging mat. So basically it's a wireless charging pad that allows you to charge your iPhone 8 or iPhone 10, your Apple Watch, only Series 3 unfortunately, as well as your AirPods, only the ones that come with the wireless charging case, which also haven't been released yet, at the same time. Now, the AirPods wireless charging case, this was also announced back in September 2017, and this could be finally coming to WWDC, finally, alongside some brand new AirPods, second generation AirPods. So the original ones were introduced back in 2016, almost 2 years ago. By the way, I've done a really in-depth video, 20-something minute video review of the AirPods. I've tested microphone tests and everything, so do check that out if you want to know more about the AirPods. But we've actually had some patents that showed water resistance, but not for the headphones, unfortunately, but just for the case. Now, wireless charging, of course, that will be included in these new AirPods, as well as the charging light indicator on the outside of the case. I mean, I don't know who came up with the idea of having the lights on the inside of the case. It was probably the same person who came up with how to charge the Apple Pencil from the iPad Pro or the Magic Mouse or the iPhone battery case. So yeah, thumbs up for that person. Next up, we've also had some reports that Apple is planning to release a cheaper version of the HomePod, a HomePod Mini, so to say, but it won't be an Apple product. Instead, it would be a Beats speaker that would also support Siri and pretty much most of the functionality of the larger and more expensive HomePod. And this new Beats Pod, it might actually be called that. I'm calling it Beats Pod. Who knows, maybe at the event they're actually going to introduce a Beats Pod. But yeah, it's going to be around $250 or 250 pounds in UK, according to most reports on this. And finally, if you're thinking about that new Mac Pro, like I am, Apple could give us a tease at WWDC, similar to how they've done it in the past with, for example, even the previous Mac Pro and the iMac Pro as well. Now, for the actual release, that would only be next year in 2019. Apple has even confirmed this, that the new Mac Pro would be modular and upgradable. Yeah, I mean, pretty much like a PC running macOS, just saying. But yeah, honestly, I'm really looking for this new Mac Pro. That's probably the Apple product that I'm waiting for the most. But yeah, there you go. Definitely subscribe if you're new to the channel and you want to see day one coverage, my day one coverage of WWDC 2018, and also enable notifications by tapping on that bell icon so that you get notified as soon as a brand new video comes out. And other than that, let me know in the comments what announcement are you looking forward to the most. What do you think of WWDC 2018? And yeah, if you like, if I've enjoyed it, let me know. I'm Daniel, and I'll see you. Not at WWDC because I won't be there, unfortunately. I wasn't invited, but maybe someday. But yeah, I'll see you in my next video. So, signing out. Cheers.